On May 30th, 1972, a tragic incident shook the Battersea Amusement Park in London. 3 carriages of the famous Big Dipper roller coaster, carrying mostly children and teenagers, unexpectedly began hurtling backward down the tracks. This uncontrolled movement resulted in the carriages derailing and colliding with the park's structure, causing the deaths of 5 young people and seriously injuring 13 others. This accident remains to this day the deadliest involving a roller coaster in history. Originally conceived as part of the 1951 Festival of Britain, a national event aimed at revitalizing the country's spirit after the difficult years of World War II, the Battersea Amusement Park continued to operate due to its immense popularity. It is not hard to see why it became so beloved. Despite its old-fashioned name, the park was actually a precursor to modern theme parks, even preceding the opening of Disneyland by 4 years. The design of Battersea Park was incredibly innovative for its time. Its exotic architectural facades and fantastical elements created an atmosphere that transported visitors to imaginary and enchanting worlds. Within this magical environment, visitors could embark on journeys through a medieval England filled with dragons, watch thrilling races in Monte Carlo, take cruises around the world, marvel at a Mississippi-style showboat playing Kentucky-style music, or even embark on a space adventure to the moon. While the park offered numerous opportunities for pure and immersive escapism, the biggest and most thrilling attraction was undoubtedly the side-friction roller coaster known as the Big Dipper. This imposing structure, dominating the park's skyline and reaching heights of 15 meters, was a must-see for thrill-seekers, with its steep drops and a dark tunnel providing an extra suspenseful experience. However, by 1972, the Big Dipper was nearly half a century old. Despite its enduring popularity, the roller coaster had undergone several repairs and redesigns. These adjustments, combined with negligent management and the absence of strict safety regulations, transformed this once fascinating attraction into an imminent tragedy. The day of disaster. It was a warm and sunny spring afternoon on Tuesday, May 30th, 1972. Schools in the UK had just begun their recess, turning Battersea Amusement Park into a sea of children and teenagers eager for fun. The lines for the iconic Big Dipper roller coaster were longer than ever, with groups of young people waiting their turn to experience the thrill. At around 2:30 p.m., 30 people, mostly children, boarded the 3-car train. As was common with older roller coasters, a brakeman accompanied the train to manually control the speed around curves and at the end of the ride. The journey started routinely, with the train being slowly hauled up the hill by a traction rope, making a creaking sound that heightened the anticipation of those watching and eagerly awaiting the thrilling descent. But what began as an afternoon of fun quickly turned into a nightmare. As the train reached the first incline, just before the highest point, the traction rope unexpectedly snapped. Suddenly, the train began hurtling backward down the tracks uncontrollably. The brakeman desperately tried to apply the brakes, but to no avail. Initially, visitors thought it was some kind of joke or harmless malfunction, laughing at what seemed like a planned situation. Even the passengers, for a brief moment, believed it was an elaborate attempt to scare them. However, reality soon struck brutally. As the train gained speed, covering a distance of about 27 meters, the laughter turned into screams of terror. The first carriage derailed as it took the curve, jumping off the tracks and plunging 4.5 meters. The following carriages disappeared behind the wooden screens of the entrance area, violently colliding with another stationary train, causing parts of the wooden structure to collapse. The impact threw several passengers out, some hanging upside down from the tracks, others lying on the ground amidst the horrified crowd. The front carriage crushed those behind it, but remained relatively intact, suspended about 15 meters from the ground. A 15-year-old girl, dazed and shocked, tried to steady herself on the wooden walkway. Initially, she screamed to get off, but upon seeing her friend covered in debris, she tried to help. Unfortunately, the structure gave way under her feet, and the young girl fell to her death. In the rear carriages, the situation was equally horrific, with several children being crushed. The scene quickly turned into complete chaos, with onlookers rushing to rescue those trapped under the debris and the bodies of other passengers, mostly children and teenagers. As emergency workers arrived, shockingly, the amusement park resumed its normal rhythm. Visitors continued to line up for other attractions, and pop music played through the speakers, even as rescuers still struggled to save 3 people trapped in the wreckage. In the end, the tragedy claimed the lives of 5 children, 3 on the spot and 2 later in the hospital, and left another 13 injured. Guilt revealed. After the tragedy, a terrifying question echoed throughout the United Kingdom. How could such a horrible disaster happen at one of the country's most beloved amusement parks? The shock was amplified by the lack of clear answers. Not even those responsible for the roller coaster, who assured monthly inspections by a qualified engineer, could provide satisfactory explanations. The atmosphere quickly filled with suspicion and accusations as the press clamored for a comprehensive public inquiry. Newspaper headlines demanded justice and transparency, and the pressure on the Big Dipper's owners increased daily. Meanwhile, a large-scale public investigation was launched to uncover the truth behind the disaster. By the end of 1972, the public investigation results were finally disclosed, revealing a shocking series of negligence. The report, forwarded to the Director of Public Prosecutions, detailed 66 critical failures on the roller coaster, including 18 severe structural defects. It was evident that the Big Dipper was not just a popular attraction, but a deadly trap. In February 1973, the trial began, accusing Frank Etches, the engineer in charge of inspections, and James Hogan, the ride manager, of manslaughter. The courtroom revelations shook the nation. The roller coaster, far from being a symbol of fun and joy, had become a nightmare of negligence and imminent danger. Mechanical catastrophe, fatal negligence. To truly understand the magnitude of this catastrophe, it is crucial to examine the primary factors that contributed to the accident. First, the deplorable condition of the traction rope. During the ascent, the rope unexpectedly snapped. It was discovered that the rope was only partially engaged in the necessary gripping device, revealing an alarming level of negligence. Secondly, the poor maintenance of safety devices. Roller coasters of this type were equipped with safety brakes, known as dogs, to prevent the train from rolling backward uncontrollably. In the case of the Big Dipper, 8 of these brakes should have been operational. However, 4 were missing, and of the remaining 4, 3 were defective. Only 1 brake was functioning at the time of the accident, and it failed under the weight of the reversing train. The third factor was the structural condition of the roller coaster, which was simply deplorable. Significant rot was found in 5 different areas, along with excessive algae growth on the walkway, where one of the engineers slipped during the investigation. It was this deteriorated walkway that gave way under the feet of the young girl who fatally fell from the train. The fourth aggravating factor was the misalignment of the tracks. This misalignment caused the derailment that ejected passengers from the carriages, culminating in a scene of chaos and horror. Beyond these direct factors, there were several other elements that contributed to the tragedy. In 1970, the roller coaster suffered a devastating fire, and parts over 50 years old were acquired as replacements. The negligence didn't stop there. Prosecutor Henry Powell revealed that the roller coaster operators were teenagers without any adequate training. A former Big Dipper employee testified that both management and staff frequently drank and used drugs while working. Additionally, a similar, though less severe incident had occurred the previous year, resulting in a passenger's arm fracture. The trial and its consequences. If you wonder how such an attraction could be left in such a precarious state, even with alleged regular inspections, you are not alone. The answer, unfortunately, lies in the lack of stringent regulations for amusement parks at the time. Essentially, they operated in a regulatory vacuum. There was a voluntary code of practice, but it was full of loopholes. Inspections by qualified engineers were recommended, but there were no clear guidelines on the frequency, type of inspection, or necessary qualifications of the engineers, leaving these decisions to the individual owners. These severe shortcomings in the safety system were the cornerstone of the defense during the trial. In November 1973, both the structural engineer and the ride manager were acquitted. The engineer had certified the ride as structurally and operationally safe, but the judge argued that this certification applied only to the train and its carriages when stationary, without including the responsibility for certifying the mechanical side of the Big Dipper. The ride manager was found innocent because the jury concluded that, as a simple laborer, he could not be expected to have the necessary knowledge to ensure the ride's safety. After the accident, the Big Dipper was dismantled, and some of its parts were reused in a smaller ride. Despite this, the park continued operating, but its popularity rapidly declined, leading to its closure in 1974. The disaster triggered a series of events that, although slow, resulted in significant changes in the law. It took nearly 2 years after the accident for amusement parks to finally be included in health and safety laws redesigned to protect the public. Although the Big Dipper accident remains the deadliest roller coaster disaster in history, to this day, little remains to suggest that the amusement park ever existed. In May 2022, a tree was planted to mark the 50th anniversary of the disaster, with plans for a permanent memorial underway. While many refer to the event as Britain's forgotten disaster, for the families of the 5 children who lost their lives and the traumatized survivors, the Battersea amusement park tragedy remains as vivid and painful as the day it occurred.